the world, the natural world, the earth, nature is what we actually have in common. It is what brings us together.
Hello, I'm Karen Mellers.
Hello there, I'm Dr. Rosy Daniel.
You've just tuned in to Alive and Loving It, and we're here to help you bring joy and energy back to your life.
Today's guest is Helen Patterson, my very good friend with whom I shared a house for many years. Helen really for me is the spirit of nature. She's lived in nature close to the earth in a caravan in the past, and she weaves nature into every aspect of her work as a teacher. She trained as a Steiner teacher, and she started a forest school, bringing little tiny dots into the countryside. She's going to talk to us about that experience. But she also now weaves her love of nature into her work educating children with special needs. So she brings nature alive through her art, through her very being, and is a real true nature spirit. So we're very happy to have today with us Helen Patterson.
Well, welcome again to our Alive and Loving It podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. And we have a really lovely episode for you tonight. We are into our third week of the health creation principle, nature, and the positive impact it has on our health. And we have another lovely guest tonight who is generously sharing her journey, her story with us. And she just is nature. She's beautiful. She lives in harmony with nature. It's so inspiring. And I know, Rosie, you're really looking forward to this one, aren't you? I mean, I'm looking forward to you two sharing your combined journey together and your connection. I mean, that's the sisterhood and the joy and the laughter you've had. So, yeah, you're looking forward to this one, Rosie.
Absolutely. And Helen is my very, very good friend. We shared a house together for 4 or so years. So we know each other very well. And Helen has just always struck me as being so close to nature. And, you know, I know, Helen, that both personally and professionally, it's just been such a big part of your life. So maybe we could start with the personal. What was it, do you think, that tuned you into nature from the beginning?
Well, I was reflecting on this actually earlier because I thought, where did we start? You know, where is the starting point? And I did a training course actually this week for teachers, for educational staff within a special support school where I work, and our starting point really was, how can we connect to those very early experiences that we had in nature that were not thought through or planned in the same way as we would as an adult, but as a young person, as a young child, how can we connect to those? Because actually that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that feeling, that innate feeling that we have when we're in a wild or natural space. And we had all sorts of responses, you know, people rolling down hills, and one of the people said, "Oh, I used to dam a river." And I thought, I'm not sure we want to go down that route, but you know, the way people were talking and connecting with themselves in those moments, actually that is the spark. And I thought, actually, what was mine? You know, I spent many a day rolling up going up the hills, rolling down the hills in the beautiful countryside of Cheshire with my family, spending hour upon hour of time making mud pies and potions with my twin sister and then younger brother at the time. And, you know, you can't say anything other than it being a magical time. There's a young person within us, when we have those moments of reflection, really connects to, you know, those long days. You know, it's like time stands still. It's a deep level learning experience. And I think that's really the starting point, because if we are able to connect to that inner child, if we're able to connect to that part of us on some level where we experience nature in a completely free way, then we are able to then start to think, well, how do I replicate this in my more held, responsible adult life?
Yeah, I so resonate with that. And I know that in your personal realm, you've lived on the land, haven't you? And been close to nature.
Yeah, very much so.
And with a baby daughter too.
Yes. So there was a time when I lived in a yurt, and that was quite an experience, actually. You know, it was so remote. I had a stream running by, completely off grid, with my young daughter, and it was such a unique experience, that I feel, you know, I really cherish that time spent there. I won't say it wasn't easy, you know, it wasn't particularly easy. And I won't say that, you know, it wasn't difficult, because in times it was, you know, it is hard work sometimes when you choose to live in that way. But the benefit, you know, the waking up in the morning to birdsong and, you know, opening up the door and there is the valley, and you make a cup of coffee and or a cup of tea and stand there, you know, looking out into this woodland, and there's only you. It is amazing. It's an amazing experience. It really is.
I bet, Karen, that's awakening memories in you, is it?
It is, definitely, particularly because I can hear the pigeon in the background as well. So those of you that are not on YouTube, if you're listening to this, Helen is in the garden, which I wouldn't expect you to be anywhere else, Helen. But I'm listening to the wood pigeon and I'm connecting with myself. When I was little, I used to have a pigeon that came to play with me every day. So it used to come and sit in my little wheelbarrow. And I'm talking like I was 2 or 3. And I was connecting to that, and then heard the pigeon in the background. And you're so right. It's the feeling. That's what we're trying. I think I'm only just realizing that, Helen, that what we're trying to get back is that feeling. And away from the fear, away from the stress. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you just reminded me of what Claire was saying about, because she said, you know, it's not all idyllic. You know, there's a lot of hard work when you collaborate with nature. And obviously she was telling us all about the beauty. But I know that you trained as a teacher, and that this has all flowed into that aspect of your life as well. You know, I know that you're a Steiner teacher, and that you've also done home ed and all different kinds of teaching. So tell us more.
All sorts of things, Rosie, all sorts of things. And I think this is the thing, you know, when I have spent some time looking back on all the things that I've been doing, and actually all of it connects to nature. You know, there's very few points in my life where I haven't had some involvement with the natural world. And, you know, from working in a Steiner school, studying Steiner education, you know, if we go back to looking at, you know, that being a young child or working with young children, they lead with their sense of will. It's such a strong force within them. They're naturally curious. We're naturally curious when we're very young, and we're naturally tenacious as well and resilient. We want to keep going. We want to keep exploring and discovering, and everything's so exciting and joyful. And, you know, as an adult, we quite often, having spoken to a number of people a couple of days ago, we quite often forget how resilient we actually are. And, you know, working as a forest school practitioner, for example, you know, you acclimatize very quickly to being outdoors. You know, I was outside 48 weeks a year, you know, sort of over 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I actually struggled to be inside in the end, because I acclimatized so quickly to all the seasons. And, you know, biggest fear for people is, oh, I'm going to be cold if I go outside, or I'm going to get wet. Yes, you are. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, and we only really appreciate the comforts in life when we felt discomfort. And nature provides plenty of opportunities for us to feel that. So definitely push through that feeling of discomfort, because level of appreciation for life and to feel gratitude for things only comes out of that understanding of what we have and what we're capable of.
When a bunch of little kids arrive in that environment, I've never been to a forest school. So tell us what it's like and what the kids, how they react coming out of their cozy houses.
It's surprising. It's usually the parents who panic, and they're usually the ones you have to calm down, really. We had children as young as 2 to 6 years at the outdoor nursery, and then later set up the home education project for 5 to 12 years. And more often than not, they would turn up, the little ones would just turn up in all their layers. In the winter, it would be dark when they turned up, and we'd have all the area floodlit and welcoming with a fire going. We'd have porridge and toast and other things around the fire. And more often than not, it was actually the parents who wanted to stay at that point, to have a cup of coffee and sit round. Again, drawing back into that, what is that feeling? What is that primal feeling we have
Magic
for the simplest things? And they are simple things, meeting one's needs in the outdoors. More often than not, people I've spoken to, my partner, for example, he often feels that he needs to be doing, if it's an outdoor activity, he needs to be snowboarding or skiing or, out on a mountain bike or whatever it happens to be. And we tend to have these very ordered experiences. Actually, sometimes it's enough just to go and sit in your garden. Sometimes it's enough just to notice things as you're walking down the street, and learning to appreciate, learning to breathe in the air properly and to regulate yourself, to have that mindfulness about you. That's enough. We haven't got to have everything that's perfect. Nature isn't perfect. It's rough around the edges. It's meant to be. And that looking for perfection or ordered life is not necessarily the one that gives us the most freedom or sense of well-being, actually.
Okay, so we've got a fire, we've got floodlights, we've got porridge. I mean, I do actually want to be there at this point.
Me too.
But the kids arrive, and they have their warm cars with their mummies and daddies.
Yeah.
I mean, how easily do they integrate into that environment?
Brilliantly, actually. More often, we very rarely had a child who would struggle to move away from their parent. It was almost like, bye, I'm gone now. We're going to go to the 50-acre nature reserve on the 15-acre lake, and you can go and get back in your car and go to work. We're here. We're going to enjoy this experience. And we'd go out. They'd be there, the little rucksacks, and off they'd go, toddling down the lane. And if you look at the benefits for those children, it's not just you're merely a presence. You're available. You're there for when they want you. But actually, the real teacher is the world around them. It's developing their knowledge and understanding, and being responsive. They're responsive to their environment. Some of the benefits being, sort of learning how to regulate yourself, learning to be resilient, learning to feel a sense of motivation, learning to be able to do the physical side of things. I look at like health creation, for example, and the amount of links to the different areas is unbelievable. You look at the spiritual side of things and feeling at one and sense of belonging, feeling part of a community, raising your vitality and your energy. These children would just naturally do that. And so, it would be just instinctive to them. We can actually learn quite a lot from those young people as adults and bring that into our own world.
I mean, when I ask my clients, where do you feel peace, or where do you get your soul food? 9 times out of 10, people say the forest.
Absolutely.
And the other 1 out of 10 is the sea.
Yes.
Yeah. Karen, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm remembering taking my 2 kids out every weekend for a walk, and the groans that I would get when I was dragging them away from and actually my husband was more determined to do this than me. And then within 10 minutes, skipping along and laughing, and energy had raised, and I always knew it was a good thing. But and then also I'm just listening to you talking about the parents and how, and the nervousness, I can imagine that, of don't let them get hurt. And we try and protect our kids too much, don't we? And then wonder why, as teenagers or as young adults, there's no resilience. I mean, that's where I learned, where we played in the dirt and we got dirty and we fell over and we grazed our knee and we got up and we carried on. I think it's amazing work that you're doing, Helen. And what a great start you had. I mean, you've definitely just followed your calling, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably would have gone down that route anyway, because it absolutely fascinated me, having trained as a forest school practitioner and working within early years in a specialist support school, and then later on moving into mainstream and noticing the sort of the lost opportunities, really, even in the school grounds, and setting up different projects and things within the schools. I think my main catalyst actually as well was my own daughter, for that particular time of setting up the nursery. And she joined when she was 2. And so it really gave her that opportunity. I remember she actually said to me not long ago, and I was really hoping, when I said to her, what sort of memories do you have of the nursery? And she sort of put her hands on her hips and went, well, I remember a time when you wouldn't help me out of the mud. And I was like, okay, to describe the situation. Well, I didn't want to put my hands in the mud and you wouldn't help me out of it. I said, but you did get out. How did you get out? She said, I asked a friend to help me. I said, so what was the learning, Orna? And she was very much, sort of saying, well, that I can ask for help. I can ask for help. I said, did you need it there, really? She said, no, not really. So, if she can develop those aspects into her own life later on, of realizing that she can ask for help, but also that she can work things out for herself as well. Those are really important lessons to learn, and we had so many of those moments at that time.
And in terms of your Steiner, I mean, I know you did a formal teacher education in amongst all of this, and then later your Steiner education, where I know there's a lot of focus. We've talked with Claire about anthroposophy and appreciating, the spirit of plants, the gesture, the signature. Karen, you've had a huge connection with that side of Walida and nature. Tell us a little bit, Karen, about that side of it for you.
Well, I remember the first time I went to the Walida Gardens, and actually it was a gardener, a beautiful man called Michael Bates, who was showing us round. And I remember all of this information, and it felt quite overwhelming, to be honest, to start with. He knew so much about an area that, to be honest, I would just walk through and ignore and take for granted. And it took a long time. And I go back to the gardens all the time. I'm going back again this year, and I learn a little bit every time I go. And I'm just remembering what Claire was saying, Rosy, about starting our relationship with this land, starting a relationship with a plant, starting a relationship with a garden. And what do you do at the beginning of a relationship? You have to listen, you have to be still, and you have to learn about the thing that you're having a relationship with. So over the years, some of this, like, I used to call it like walking through stardust with these words that were being said to me, and some of it stuck. And I reflect to myself that actually the things that I needed to learn at that time stayed with me. And there was so much more that didn't. But I really trust in that as you spend more and more time in nature, you build your relationship and you learn what you need to learn at that time in your life. It's just such a beautiful connection, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, one of the key things that I took from the Steiner educational work that I did was looking at the different age groups and how they experience nature, how they experience the world. So obviously I've, already mentioned the younger children, have this very, sort of very physical side, and that drive, their will drives them to explore and to get as far as they can, pushing outward. They learn to, from being very small, learn to stand, learn to walk, learn to run, and learn to explore with their bodies. When you get into from sort of around the age of 7 to 14, you're actually looking at the heart space. You're looking at that feeling world. And just as I was listening to you then, Karen, talking about, how you nurture a relationship to begin with, actually, it's about learning to love. It's learning to see the beauty within the world around you, or with any kind of relationship, to fully appreciate and have gratitude for. And, that feeling world is encapsulated by storytelling, by art, by spoken word, by all sorts of different ways, music, singing, all those expressions, and they're all linked to the natural world. If we look at folk music, look at, a lot of the old stories, they feature, we look at art, it features, paintings, you can't go to an art gallery without having some element of nature brought in some way or another to the artwork. And I think this is really what it fosters, for me anyway, working in the Steiner educational world, is that we grow upwards and, grow from being, very physical, the will driving, into that feeling heart space. And then much later on, because we've had that experience of the beauty of the world around us, we want to take care of it. We want to be ambassadors for the world around us, and we want to be advocates for creating a better world around us. And that is really fundamental to the way that Steiner education works, or certainly what I took from it, that you're looking at, developing that joy and curiosity, and then that feeling heart space, and then moving into the head and thinking space. Well, how can I have some kind of responsibility for this space? Rosy, you said with health creation, it's about moving out that passive dependence and into proactive responsibility. And I think that's absolutely key for our young people, and certainly, and for us as adults, to realize that, that is our vocation, that we have responsibility to ourselves and to one another and to the planet, to care for the things around us, to have that connection, and therefore that drive and that will to make a better space for everyone.
Wonderful. What a beautiful way to put it, Helen. And in the work you do now, where you're working with children with special needs, is it possible to weave this in to your work at the moment?
Absolutely. Like I said, I led a training course this week with the staff, and started off with, taking them through that process really for themselves, looking at the key benefits, and also looking at how we plan for those opportunities for our students. Many of them are individualized educational plans, and it's about looking at, how they will interact with the spaces that we offer them and the opportunities we offer them. And I was very, very much keen to kind of push this idea that we have the learner, or it's sort of a triangular dialogue with the learner, the facilitator, which would be ourselves, and then the environment. And our role within that is to make sure there is a very clear understanding of the learner's needs, but also to keep things safe and manageable, to provide resources that may be needed, that the learner may wish to engage with, to have an idea of what we want as an outcome. What's the impact? Why are we doing this? So, looking at the benefits for those learners. But the magic really happens when we are able to step back and allow the environment to be a co-creator of that situation, because in the classroom, it's so defined. We're so used to, particularly as teachers, to control the environment and control what happens. And, many teachers are very good at being responsive. It's what they call a Dionysian teacher in the Steiner world. So some are also more like the Appalachian teachers, where everything has to be very organized, very planned, and they find it harder to be responsive. We have to be responsive when we take the children outside, because the environment between the environment and the learner is the point at which the magic really happens. We get to see something that we might never have even considered. We may never have even thought would happen. And there's the magic. That's the bit that's the sort of the scary bit for many people, but also because we have to relinquish that control, but also the most magical bit. And, we have that opportunity with nature. We can either settle into it in a really, held, gentle way, if we allow ourselves to let go, or we can try to control it and have some influence on it, which hopefully will be positive.
Well, just what a perfect way of describing it. It's really reminding me of my teachers, the big book that Ramdas wrote, Be Here Now. And, that ability, I know one wise friend said to me, when we talk about looking after children, the idea is, they lead, we follow, we are looking after them. They are on their journey of exploration. It's not like we are trying to control them. And you just evoke such a beautiful feeling of coming into that presence of nature, that awakening presence. And you're reminding me of one time as a little tiny child. I was staying with friends for the night, and the breakfast wasn't quite ready, and I wandered out into the garden, and I sat at the base of this tree with probably this, like now, beltane with flowers everywhere, and I just suddenly had that absolutely electrifying moment of that kind of leaping consciousness of kind of feeling hyper alert, hyper aware of the magic, because it wasn't being controlled. And I'm guessing, Karen, this is touching memories for you too, or thoughts.
Well, I know I'm connecting in with a feeling, which is what we were talking about at the beginning. I know I feel amazing at the moment. And I think so beautifully the way you described, Helen, coming back to us knowing that we actually are nature. We're not separate from it. And Rosy, when you were speaking then, and you sat on that tree with all the flowers and the feeling you had in your heart, I know that. And I've had to remember that in my adult life. And I've had those moments in the garden by the sea. And that amount of love and belonging, that sensation is, I think it's when religious people might describe that they feel God, that they feel that. And it's such an incredible resource. That's what we're doing, aren't we? We're reconnecting to source. And we're remembering that, all of those worries we've got about getting somewhere on time or hitting a deadline or whatever else the stress comes up is nothing compared to feeling what is the truth. Yeah.
And I can remember in my primary school, probably my two main memories. One was sitting outside, hearing the birds under the trees, sewing our little raffia mats. But the other was, peak experience. They took us on a nature ramble down a path next to a brook, again in the spring moment. And it was kind of like, the wonder, the incredible wonder of being in nature. I will never forget it.
It's quite tender, isn't it? When you get the feeling back again, it can be quite emotional.
Yeah.
And just what I would say is love. Huge amount of love. Yeah. Well, I'm dying to know with you two, what was it like living with each other?
I knew you were going to ask that, Karen.
Okay, well, kitchen parties were a bit of a feature, weren't they, Helen?
Most definitely. And microplates, I seem to remember.
Microplates. If ever
Rosy is an excellent cook, by the way.
If ever one of us was cooking and we'd already eaten our supper, but the other one was cooking, we just sort of had a little microplate just to taste it. Yeah.
I don't know who would lead the other one astray more.
Oh, well, pretty equal on that front. But, in one thing I learnt from dear Evelyn at Walida about the different ways we are sort of rhythmic, and nerve sense and metabolic. And you were the perfect example of the rhythmic person, because we had to remind Helen to eat. I'm the Pooh Bear. I'm the kind of when's lunch, you know. And I'm planning the next day's food, you know, the day before. And Helen's there, you know, like she's been
searching for a piece of cheese
on something for 10 hours. And Helen, you know, are you going to eat anything, sweetheart? Yeah.
I've not changed, Rosie.
Food again.
Yeah. Oh, and the mystery of how much stuff you could actually get into your room. Because, you know, Helen would arrive with a carload of stuff, and then it would go to her room, and then another one, and in it would go, and then another one, in it would go. And yet her room always looked just kind of beautiful. And
you never know when you might need these things, you see.
But it's
like the room always looked great, didn't it? It's just
the verse of Mary Poppins' handbag or Odin's cup. It's like, you know, you just somehow managed to find a space for it all.
Where there is a will, there is a way. And
then you take it all out again.
I know.
For some reason.
Yes.
And then more carloads would come. It was unbelievable.
I've not changed one bit. I've just have a house now.
And then there'd be things like kind of axes and hatchets and chisels and blocks of wood and other tools, you know, that normally people don't keep in their bedroom. But, you know.
Well, just listening to you, Helen, I mean, and I'm looking at you now, and you just seem full of life, love. And if that is, you know, down to how much time you've spent in nature through your life, then that's just beautiful to witness. It makes me want to go outside right now and and spend more time with the birds. It's wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And if there's any final words that you want to share with people about nature.
I think your last point you were making before, and that spiritual connection, I think what we have to consider really is the world, the natural world, the earth, nature is what we actually have in common. It is what brings us together. And, you know, I think that's where the real work can begin, and where the real benefit can start to emerge for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. You know, it's soul food, isn't it, of the highest order? But it's also the food we eat. You know, the food for our eyes, the beauty.
Yeah.
And I just feel so many of us are so starved of light, oxygen, you know, air, wind, elements. I had one client who said to me, she was journeying with stage 4 breast cancer with lung secondaries. But when she felt deplete, she would either go and stand in the rain and let herself get soaking wet. She'd lie on the earth and connect with the earth. She'd stand against the wind and just allow the elements to completely embrace her and fill her. And she journeyed with that illness in her lungs for 9 years, because every time she felt herself waning, she would go and get herself directly recharged from nature. So, yeah. And a little story about a time I went on a retreat in the south of France. It was billed as being in a chateau. Ha ha ha. It was it was really quite a nasty place with sort of lino floors and iron beds and horsehair mattresses. And I just said, I'm not going to sleep in there. I'm going to look for somewhere else in this chateau to sleep. So I found a haystack at the head of a valley, and I took my mattress outside and stuck it in the top of the haystack and slept there for 10 nights. Well, you know the way you come to through the night? And, you know, I'd come to and there'd be like, you know, stars and moonbeams, and then I'd come to and there'd be mist rising in the valley, and then I'd come to and the dawn would be breaking. And the feast of beauty that I had in that experience was 10 times more valuable than the retreat, you know, because it just showed me how much by having bricks and mortar and how much we cut ourselves off from. You know, this beauty bath, this light show, not to mention all the oxygen. So if you had to, a way to, if anybody's listening who feels detached from nature, what are the ways you would just encourage people in, would you say?
I think more often than not, people tend to people I've spoken to, and certainly for myself, I'm really busy most of the time. And I think people often feel like, I have to plan a day out. You don't have to plan a day out. It's engagement, really. It's a willingness to take a step outside the door, and that might be enough. It might be enough to be able to step outside the door and water your plants, or even plant something, plant a seed. It doesn't have to be an allotment. It doesn't have to be a huge garden. It could merely be the doorstep, but get out, breathing the air. And, if you make your morning coffee, don't sit inside on the sofa. Just take a moment to stand outside. It doesn't have to be much. It's the tiny things that all add up. And it's the noticing and it's being aware rather than the sort of big events. We've got plenty of big events in our lives. Let's have the small ones, the small magical moments that we can create for ourselves.
It would be really, really good to hear from people who are listening. So if you're listening and you have a very simple daily practice in nature that you'd like to share, then go to the website and fill in the contact form, and that will come straight to me and Rosy, and we can mention it on here to everybody. I bet there's wonderful, wonderful things that will come in. Can't wait to hear from you.
Yes, all your magic places, your magic memories. Yeah, you're an absolute darling, Helen. And thank you so, so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to chat to you and share some of those experiences with you. It's really
gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you, Helen. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Alive and Loving It. We really hope that today's conversation has sparked your passion and shown you ways to open up into the vibrant life that's possible for you.
Absolutely, Rosy. I mean, we have to remember transformation begins with love, and that's self-love, love for others, and love for our beautiful planet. When you embrace love and you just allow yourself to receive as much as you give, you unlock the fullest potential of your life.
That is the truth, and we're here to support you every step of the way on your journey. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, please join our community, check out our trainings and our services and the events where we can all go deeper together. And do please send us your feedback. We want to hear your ideas for the podcast, who you'd like to see us interview, the questions you want to ask, and get answered through the contact page on our website, aliveandlovingit.org.
I can't wait to read them. And when you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter and updates. And what about following us on Instagram as well? We are at Alive and Loving It Community. Once you've signed up to the newsletter, you'll receive extra notes from today's show and more inspiration to help you live your most vibrant life.
Thank you for being with us. Keep shining, stay true to yourself, and remember, this is your time to live your fullest, healthiest life.
So until next time, keep doing what you love most in life. I know Rosy and I will be, always. We're so excited to connect with you on the next episode of Alive and Loving It. And we welcome you with open hearts to our Alive and Loving It community.